Good morning. I would love today to share with you some pictures that I have. I'm going to start with some really old pictures. These are some pictures of my grandmother, Leota Alberta Parkhurst. And these pictures are from when my grandma was a baby. You can see here, she's sitting on the lap of her mom. And down here, she's sitting on the lap of her dad. And in the middle is my grandma all by herself. These pictures are really old. They're from 1912. That's a long time ago. In fact, that's over 100 years ago. And these two people, Berdella and Harry, they're my great-grandparents. Now, I never got to meet Harry and Berdella, but they're part of who I am. They're part of my story. Now, my grandma grew up and she met my grandpa and they got married and they had kids. And those kids were Alan, Judy, and Linda. Alan is my dad. Let me show you a picture of them. This is today because I'm really lucky. They're still in my lives today. Here's Judy and my dad and my Aunt Linda. I'm really lucky to have them around. Now, when my dad grew up, he married my mom, Barb. Here's a picture of them. Have you ever looked at a picture and felt really, really kind of mixed emotions? I do when I look at this picture. I feel happy and sad. Happy because they're my mom and dad. They taught me so many wonderful things, and I love them very much. But I also feel sad because my mom died, and I miss her a lot. And sometimes I think about that, and I really wish she was still here. But do you know what? I still love her. So that tells me that that's a way that she's still here. That love that we shared with each other, it's still here. Now, I want to tell you something else about my mom and my dad and my grandma. They taught me lots of things about life. One of the biggest things they did was teach me about God. I didn't really think about that when I was little, but they took me to church. I sang in the children's choir. I went up for the children's sermons. I had First Communion, and I got confirmed there. In fact, here's a picture of me and my cousin Mike. We got confirmed at the same time. And here's our confirmation class. And my grandma was there. My mom and dad were there. My aunts and uncles were there to celebrate with us, because one of the things that they taught us was all about God's love and all about what faith, how important faith was to their lives. And of course, I grew up and I got married. Here's a picture of me and Mr. Chafee. And I had kids. You know some of them. Here's a silly picture of Luke and Michael and Nathan. And here's a picture of Bethany, my 4 kids. And because of what I learned about God's love and faith, I brought my kids to church and showed them how important it was to them. And Luke and Bethany got First Communion and confirmed. And now Michael and Nathan had First Communion, and they're in confirmation now. All of that awesome learning has been passed on from generation to generation. From the examples that I saw in my grandmother and my parents and my aunts and uncles, And now I'm passing on to my children today. When I think about that, that makes me think about another family that we have, God's family. Think about when we were in our church together, when we saw each other all the time. We saw all ages of people. People that might have looked a little bit more like my grandma, and people that might have looked like my mom and dad, or my aunts, and people that look like me and Mr. Chafee, and people that look like Beth and Luke and Michael and Nathan, or maybe kids that look like babies or even littler. We are all part of God's family. And one of the things we do together is share God's love with each other and our faith stories with each other. There's one more picture I have, but it's empty. Because someday, I hope that there'll be another member of our family in this picture. Maybe a child of Beth or Luke or Michael or Nathan, or maybe all of them, and be my grandchild. And we, I hope, will continue sharing our stories and our love and the stories of God's love with that child. Today at church, we're celebrating All Saints Sunday. And saints is kind of a funny word because you might think of a saint as somebody who never does anything wrong. But actually, the way that you can really think about saints are people that have shared love from generation to generation. People that have shared God's love through their love of us. Just like my great-grandparents loved my grandmother, and she loved my dad, and my dad loved me, and I love my children, and my children will love their children. That is an amazing story. And one that makes us happy sad, because there are people like my grandmother or my mom that have died. And today at church, you're going to hear some names of people that died this year. The saints that have gone now to, they have died, and the only way that we really can feel them is with that love that never ends. But also with the faith stories that they've shared with us along the way. And someday, we will be the saints for my grandchildren and your grandchildren. It's an amazing thing and a wonderful thing to celebrate. Will you say a prayer with me? Dear God, you give us so many people to share the story of your love. Be with each person, young and old, and be with us today as we remember the people who have died and how you love them and how that love continues. Amen.